Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It is Wednesday, May 25th. I'm a little late with this one-on-one interview. Unfortunately, Jeff and I, mainly through my fault, couldn't get together on Monday of the MIP, which is when we were originally going to do this. So we've kind of telephone tagged for a while, and now we're going to do our MIP interview. And I want first, I'm going to have, if you're not familiar with the company, Precipitate Gold trades on the venture. The symbol is PRG. Symbol in the US is PREIF. Uh, I'm very well acquainted with the company. I was one of the founders many years ago. Uh, I haven't been directly involved with the company for a long time, but I continue to be a large shareholder and interested. And I'm close friends with Jeff and Mike Moore and most of the guys on the board for that matter. And I sent out an update just before MIF when Jeff announced a deal he had done with Barrick, and I made the comment people probably took as a joke, but I didn't really mean it as one, which is that the key to successful negotiating is not being on the other side of the desk from Jeff, because I've watched Jeff negotiate several different things over the years, and he's very, very good at it. And this deal that he just did with Barrick is yet another example. And rather than steal his thunder, I'm going to pass this over to Jeff. You're looking now at a map that shows the location of the Barrick Gold Corp's Pueblo Viejo mine. The project areas in yellow, those are the precipitate ones. And Jeff just did a deal on on a small part of the precipitate one. So can you walk us through what you and Barrick just agreed to, Jeff?
Yeah, as a little bit of context, we picked up this entire land package that you see here in yellow, as you know, Eric, along with a satellite project about 30 kilometers east called Ponton. All of that ground in 2019, we closed the deal for $25,000 cash and some shares of Precipitate that were escrowed out over 3 years. Obviously, the gold market was soft at that time, and the perception of the Dominican Republic was pretty soft. So we got a large land package for what we believe to be the right time to be a buyer. Fast forward 2 or 3 years, we've done an earning agreement with Barrick, and they're earning they are earning 70% on the ground in yellow here. But in the midst of that, and having spent $2.5 million in exploration, they reached out to us some months ago and indicated that they'd like to pull out a couple of relatively small portions of the Pueblo Grande project for their own purposes, largely for infrastructure purposes for the mine. And so what we've agreed to with Barrick is that, if you can see my cursor here, I don't know if you can or can't, but
Yeah,
the ground here, immediately to the west and a little bit to the north of the existing mine pits, and some ground out here sort of southeast of the existing mining operation. We've pulled out pieces of land there that will go 100% to Barrick. And by our relinquishing of that ground, Barrick agreed to pay Precipitate $5 million US, which at the time we announced the close of that was about 6.4 million Canadian dollars. We were also granted a 3% NSR on those 2 pieces of ground on either side of the mining site. So some pretty good value there in an NSR of 3% on ground adjacent to one of the biggest mining operations in the world. And we're comfortable that in doing this deal, what we've carved out to Barrick is ground that, based on historic work and our own assessment, is essentially sterile. This is ground that has seen 119 historic drill holes combined in those 2 areas. Yes, there are some sniffs. Yes, there's some interesting stuff that kind of kept people going back, but ultimately nothing there that really is meaningful or extractable to Barrick. And so we're comfortable that what we're giving away here is sterile ground, and to get a cash payment to the tune of $5 million US for that, while the balance of the earn-in agreement continues on with the remainder of the project, without any of that $5 million being applied against the obligations of the earn-in. So Barrick still has to spend $10 million US over 6 years and produce a pre-feasibility study to earn their 70%. We think this is a win-win for us, and puts us in a really nice cash position here going forward, while Barrick continues to explore and spend money on the balance of the project.
It's a great deal, and I was really impressed when I saw it. I mentioned in the update and to a few people at MIP, I don't, you have to have been around this business as long as I have to appreciate how unusual, and it's extremely unusual to pick up an early stage project, turn around and essentially get a 10 bagger on it on a sale of like 20% of the ground. And the company that's paying you the $5 million still has option obligations on the rest of the ground. And according to them, plans to continue exploring it. I mean, it's a fantastic deal. Puts you in great shape cash wise. I mean, I know this isn't a statistic that probably makes you or me happy. I own a lot of the stock, but it's basically trading, essentially at cash value right now. You do have other things to do, however. You've got projects in Newfoundland, and in addition to the cash that you just got from Barrick, I mean, I know you've got a couple million and largely flow through, and of course, being flow through, it's got to get spent in Canada, and happily you have a place to spend it. Can you put out a news release yesterday saying you just gotten back on the ground in Newfoundland? Do you want to elaborate a little bit on what the plans are there now? Because I mean, obviously everything's subject to results. It's always subject to results everywhere. But you must be feeling, if we want to if things go well and we want to accelerate this, we can. And you're probably a little less concerned about, yeah, we've got X million in flow through. We can just kind of go for it without flow through because we've got this big cushion now.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have said it. I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, I think that you're always a little bit cautious about deploying your treasury and running, a little bit too low. And yes, we raised $2.1 million in December, 1.6 of that being flow through. But you're always sort of watching the clock and the calendar on your hard dollars and when that trickles down and when you're going to have to raise more. And then you become ultra reliant upon results and ultra reliant upon the tenor of the market when you put out those results, as I'm sure a lot of our peers in the last couple of months can attest to, that even good results in the wrong market don't necessarily put you in a favorable position. So having that sort of safety net, if you will, of this additional Barrick contribution to our treasury, all hard dollars, of course, gives us, I think, the wherewithal to do exactly what that $1.6 million in flow through is earmarked for, and it's to spend it in Canada this year. And so we plan to be pretty aggressive. We've just announced, as you said this morning, that we've got boots on the ground at our Mother Lode project in the Burn Peninsula. I do like to point out that we're sort of testing some areas here where we're not trying to sort of bolt on to the existing heart of the action in and around Newfound Gold. In our estimation, a lot of the stuff that's easily accessible there has already been staked up and acquired, and to try to sort of be part of a story that's really kind of overly staked and acquired, I think is futile. So we're looking in areas that are distinct from that with their own geological merit. Mother Lode falls into that category. This is an area that, as I'll show on the next map here, this is a fairly large land package. It strikes nearly 17 kilometers from tip to tail. It's probably a little bit small on the screen here, but there are a pretty significant number of historic numbers and values that have been derived from historic drilling, sampling, geochem, rock samples. But what's interesting about this land package, as is outlined in red here, is that before we came in, this was actually a number of different land holdings in the hands of a number of different vendors. And, we saw the initial target as being in and around the Mother Lode zone, sort of in this sort of southern portion of the project here, where the historic drilling had been, as being sort of the obvious target. But we knew we wanted to have size, and you wanted to be able to, give yourself a better shot at success. And so we were able to negotiate 7 different deals with 7 different vendors to consolidate this land package into one contiguous project for the first time ever. So, we're pretty excited about the fact that we've got a lot of hunting ground here, a lot of interesting showings. And with the work that we're doing now, basically boots on the ground, Michael Moore, the VP Exploration, and his crew, kicking around on ATVs and hoofing it through the project to kind of go to some of these areas that we show with stars here and do some ground truthing. Have a look at these areas, make sure that they were, not overlooked, make sure that they were sampled properly, mapped properly. And to, there's nothing quite like going down and picking up rocks yourself to get a sense of where you really want to be. There's also a fair bit of work that we've done here with respect to structure, and we did run an airborne geophysical survey over the project area when we first acquired it late last year. So all of that data, along with guys being on the ground, is hopefully going to give us, in fact, has given us a number of target areas, about 17 or 18 different target areas within the project, some high priority, some secondary priority, where the plan is through the ground proofing that we're doing here in the coming weeks. If everything stands up and holds up, we will then go back to those specific zones and any new ones that emerge from our boots on the ground with ground IP. And as we've evidenced in the past, and you're very well aware, Eric, for us in the DR, that's kind of typically been the sort of the final drill target delineation tool for kind of deciding or dictating where we want to put some drill pads and do some initial testing. So that's the work that we're doing now at Motherlode. All of that hoped to gear towards a follow-up campaign of IP, ground IP, that will then lead into a drill play, hopefully this summer or maybe early fall. You know, Newfoundland being what it is with respect to the amount of work that's going on, we've sort of softly secured drill contractors. So, you know, again, we've got some work to do here before we fully commit, but I think we've got you know, our fingers in a few pies here to make sure that we can get the work done in the time that we want it done. I don't expect any issues with respect to permitting in this part of the world. Our peers are showing us that the permitting process in Newfoundland is quite swift. So I'm excited about that change from, you know, our previous jurisdiction and the timelines that have come from that. And then we will, as guys finish up the work here, they'll immediately hop over to our ACE project, which is sort of on the northern part of the province, and sort of a long strike from a couple of known companies, being what used to be Ethos Gold, which is now Prospector, and Exploits Discoveries. So both of those companies are immediately a long trend from us. So this is Ethos, or what used to be Ethos and is now Prospector. You know, there's some samples here over 7,000 grams per ton gold. I mean, this is an incredibly rich area, and they've had some incredible success with prospecting and sampling. We'll see how the drilling goes. And then our friends at Exploits, again, have had some really good prospecting and sampling success. Drilling's been a little bit hit and miss up to this point. But what this map tries to evidence is that although our ACE project is quite literally an island off the mainland of Newfoundland, as you can see in simple sort of cartoon here, the coloring is really the rock type and the geology. And what we see here is an opportunity to sample and test the same rock type that is producing some incredibly high-grade material on the mainland over on the island, you know, a 20-minute ferry ride away, that has essentially never been sampled before we got there, other than a couple of interesting high-grade samples on and just off the project area. So this one's a little bit more conceptual, a little bit more early stage, but
and there is a scheduled ferry, right? This isn't like this isn't a chopper project. You just jump on a government ferry to get over there.
That's right. There is a ferry that leaves, I think it's every hour on the hour, sort of from the tip of the mainland here. It's a straight direct ferry ride over. And again, this isn't a small little ferry. I mean, this is, you know, vehicle carrying ferry where you can drive from the highway right onto the ferry like you do here in British Columbia, get over to the other side within about 20-30 minutes. And there's a highway that runs from that ferry port here down at the south end of the island right up through the heart of the island. So access and infrastructure is fantastic. Yes, it's remote in that it's off the mainland, but easily accessible. And like you point out, not helicopters. We're talking just it's a car on a ferry and you're there.
Okay. So that one comes after. So you go to ACE after you go to ACE after Motherlode, while you're waiting grasses and all that kind of stuff, and then kind of the same idea here. Is ACE a little earlier stage, you think, or?
It is. I mean, basically, there were a handful of historic samples that we were able to sort of look at in terms of picking up this ground. But essentially, we picked it up because it was the same vendors that brought us this project who had vended in to Exploits and to Ethos, or now Prospector. And so we like the pedigree of the guys that it was coming from. And yeah, you're taking a little bit of a flyer because you're looking at something that's off the mainland. But again, you know, the access for us wasn't an issue. We have done with the prospectors and the vendors who brought us the project, the Quinlan family, they have done a program of follow-up sampling for us. Now, those results have been in the lab, and as everybody in the industry knows, that's been a painful process to get. But I'm hoping that we will have some assays back from that sampling program that we did late last year in the coming weeks, maybe the next month or so. And so that will sort of feed into, yes, we're going back, we're doing some follow-up sampling. We maybe get the results from that first phase of sampling to indicate where, you know, we may see some joy and that we want to follow up. And again, I think the idea here will be to conduct an airborne geophysical survey over the ACE project to again give us some geophysical signatures that we may want to follow up on, and again, ground truth with boots on the ground, perhaps followed up again by ground IP and hoping to lead that into a drill play. So there's possibility here that both of these projects emerge to a drill stage this year. I think Mother Lode, I'm very comfortable that that will in fact happen. ACE, we'll have to see how some of these early sampling results come back and what the geophysical survey looks like before we get too far ahead of ourselves. So with the money that we raised last year for flow through, we sort of have the ability to sort of pivot one way or another. We can either allocate sort of a budget fully towards, let's say, Mother Lode for a substantial drill program of up to 5,000 meters. That's our best guess based on the current budget. Or if we deem it to be, necessary, for lack of a better word, we could also split up that drill budget, do some holes at Mother Lode, some holes at ACE, and then look towards an additional top up or taking some of the hard dollars to go back and follow that up. But what we're budgeted here for is somewhere in the ballpark of about a 5,000 meter drill campaign for Newfoundland in general this year. That's kind of the hope.
Okay. Now you have this pot of money that Barrick kindly gave you. I know, I mean, like I said, I've been in this company since it was founded because I was one of the guys that founded it. And I've known you a long time. You and Mike really know how to stretch a dollar. You're not the kind of guys that'll say like, "Yay, we got $6 million. We'll just give ourselves raises and sit around for the next 10 years." I know you're going to want to find a way. You're not in a mad rush, but you're going to find a way to lever this money, much as you leverage the funds that were initially put into the Pueblo Grande, and that's worked out so well. So, to me, that means you guys are probably at least starting to look around for other projects. So, I mean, if I were to ask you, what does the perfect project look like for Precipitate? I mean, and I know you guys are still, you haven't even really started the process, but just in a sort of a general arm wavy sense, what do you think you're going to be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a wonderful position to find ourselves in, especially in an otherwise challenging, difficult market where raising money is hard. And I think that, what we've proven in the past, I hope with our track record and things like the Pueblo Grande acquisition is to be buyers in depressed markets rather than, chasing the hot story and kind of overpay. And then when things kind of shift and go a different direction, you're stuck holding the bag. I think, sometimes that contrarian thinking and looking at where there are opportunities that others don't necessarily see, or, unfortunately, some of our peers are just through no fault of their own. They're just in tough positions. And so, having the treasury makes us an attractive partner for anybody to sort of talk to or look at. So yes, you're right. We are going to have some board discussions and management discussions to sort of, vector sort of the big broad world of opportunities and try to focus our time and effort in assessment on things that, we kind of already have an idea where we want to focus our efforts. But I think, it's everything from project specific, hey, there's a project, it's orphaned in a company that's got, 3 other more advanced things, or a uranium company that still has a gold project from, a prior life. There are some of these projects that I think can be acquired project specific. There are M&A opportunities where guys have come to me and said, look, we've got money in the treasury and a bunch of good projects, and maybe 1 + 1, you've got money in the treasury and a bunch of good projects. Maybe 1 + 1 = 3 or 4 or 5 if we kind of come together. So it's kind of the world is our oyster at the present time, and you're right. I mean, I think Mike and I are both built in a manner that, you know, we pat ourselves on the back for about 30 seconds after this Barrick deal, and then say, okay, well, you know, up to the next challenge. I mean, let's get on with what we're going to do with this, and until, quite frankly, until we bring about a return on investment for our shareholders, you know, we really haven't done our job. So doing this Barrick deal is great, puts money in the treasury. But to me, what are we going to do with it that actually benefits the guy that holds the shares? You know, that's really what we're here to do. That's our job, and so we're spending a lot of time looking at that. Now, I'm not discounting our existing portfolio. There's every possibility that, you know, a bit of success in Newfoundland or a change in circumstance in the Dominican Republic, and it could absolutely be game on for one or more of those projects, and for us to have, you know, the war chest of, you know, $8+ million Canadian in the bank will give us the ability to push forward on that without having to go back to the market. That very well could drive the share price and drive buying in the market, because if the market knows you don't need to raise money on the back of drill success, there's one way to ride along for that success, and it's to go buy the stock. So so anyway, we're, you know, I think everything from, you know, early stage conceptual stuff to that you know, that sort of fits our profile from an exploration, you know, our group, Eric, as well as anybody, you know, a lot of guys who are built for, you know, early stage exploration and finding something new, which I think the industry needs more of, but all the way up to some ounces in the ground that maybe have been underappreciated, or there's, you know, significant exploration potential to build that resource to something more meaningful. We would look at all those opportunities, and are looking at all those right now.
Okay. And I'll just, you know, in closing, I'll point out, because we didn't deal with it, um, much because I didn't want to. You know, we're all waiting and hoping that that your neighbor Goldquest gets a permit, and for that matter, that the Barrick guys get permits. I'm hoping the deal they did with you is indicative of them having conversation with the government. It would be odd that they would do it otherwise. But I'm just going to point out, and we're not going to cover it today at all, but you know, if there's finally a miracle and the guys in San Domingo finally get their thumbs out and give Goldquist a permit, I was sort of leading the charge and picking up the ground around Romero, and I still really like that project. It's got great targets, but there's just no point doing anything until something happens and Goldquist gets a permit. But if they do, yeah, I agree with you. I would think that would be game on. That doesn't mean you want to go and find something else as well on top of it, because you're pretty cashed out. But I just think, you know, Precipitate's got a lot of different ways now that things can go right for it. They don't need to raise money, which is a massive, massive advantage in a market like this. And the stock's basically trading at cash. I mean, you want risk reward. There you are, cash value with a team that's shown they can turn small amounts of cash into large amounts of cash with a bit of leverage and a lot of smart negotiating. You know, I think it's something you gotta be paying attention now that you maybe should have before, but you definitely need to now that they've got this money in the bank. So I'm glad you came to MIP at the last second, Jeff, after that deal finally closed. And those of you watching, I mean, this is a story I think you got to get on and start paying attention to, because in a market that's been difficult so far this year and might be difficult for a little while longer, you really want deals that are positioned like this where they don't have to go to market and they've got lots of optionality with different projects, and even more optionality layered on top with a cash account that allows them to go out and get good stuff on the cheap when other people are struggling. I think that makes for a great story. So just Precipitate Gold, PRG on the venture, PREIF in the US. Jeff Wilson, CEO. Again, fantastic negotiating job. Jeff. Way to go. Congrats. And here's hoping the bottom's in, big fellow.
Yes, I'm with you on that. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Eric. Appreciate it. Always good talking to you.